And I also had the opportunity to fight with the Yokozuna, the grand champion.
で、
And
その
there were 2 times that I actually won the grand champion as well.
What are the career paths that a sumo wrestler can choose after retirement?
It is very hard to become the Oyakata, the stable master. There are only few seats. So most of the wrestlers, they start working at the restaurant, or maybe some start working in the construction industry, or some become a caretaker at a nursery home.
Sumos are actually not allowed to drive in Japan. Is that true? What does it take to reach the very top of one of the world's most revered and ancient sports? We're about to find out. Imagine a man so imposing, so commanding, that mere mortals tremble in his presence. A true titan among men, whose very footsteps shake the earth and whose piercing gaze could freeze the blood in your veins. Well, today, we have the extraordinary privilege of sitting across that very man. A legend in the world of sumo wrestling, a figure who, through sheer force of will and unbreakable discipline, has risen from the ranks of high school and university champions to become a revered komusubi, one of the highest titles a wrestler can achieve in the professional sumo ranks. This living legend graces us with his presence, ready to share the remarkable journey that has led him here. A story of triumph, of sacrifice, and of the unwavering pursuit of greatness. Ojamashimasu, Mr. Takayuki Sakuma, welcome to Happy Alien Life. So let's begin from the beginning. Where were you born?
I was born in Tokyo. I grew up with my parents and 2 other siblings. I have an elder brother and a younger sister.
And are they also into wrestling or any sport of that kind?
So my elder brother was in sumo. However, my parents did not have any relationship with sumo as such, but they were both basketball players. But my younger sister, she has no relationship with any kind of sports.
So, do you think your brother had an influence on you to join sumo wrestling?
Indeed. In fact, I joined sumo because my elder brother was into sumo wrestling.
And when both of them used to wrestle, who would win?
Well, my brother and I, we are 3 years apart, so we didn't really get a chance to have a match between us. But since he's older, and especially when we were young, it's probably him who would definitely be the stronger one.
And were your parents very supportive of you joining sumo? Or they weren't very happy that both their sons joined sumo wrestling?
You know, both my parents used to play sport, basketball. And I think that was one of the reasons why they were very supportive. It was not because I was in sumo particularly, but they were very supportive simply because I was pursuing a sport, and that too so passionately.
Right. And when did you realize that you wanted to go become a sumo wrestler and take it up professionally? What was that moment?
Well, I started sumo from the age of 7 and I continued it as a student until the age of 21. And during the time I was about to graduate university, I was a little confused in my mind. Maybe I should quit sumo. But I also felt somewhere that maybe I should give it a go and challenge myself in the world of professional sumo wrestling.
Why did you want to quit sumo for that brief period of time? What was going on in your mind?
No. I wasn't thinking of quitting sumo. I was deciding whether to choose a professional sumo team or to join one of those companies that have these amateur sumo teams.
Right. And the whole world is so intrigued by sumo wrestlers, and also because it is such a regimented, such a disciplined game. So, can you please talk us through a day of your life? How many hours do you train? What do you eat? How is it like?
So, as a sumo wrestler, we do the morning practice every day. And after the morning practice, all the wrestlers have free time. But I would do some weight training in that free time in the afternoon. And as well, at night, I would just train. And I would just keep imagining myself winning the match.
So, he would think about winning day in and day out. What do you think of mental strength? I mean, people look at sumo training and they say, oh, they are so physically tough and they have to be very strong. And I think a lot of the times they overlook the mental strength that one needs. And when Mr. Sakuma has said that he would think about winning all the time, can he tell us how important that is, and what is the role of his mental strength that has made him one of the top sumo wrestlers?
So after I became a sumo wrestler, I soon got married. And as a wrestler, you have to be on a certain ranking to earn some salary. So that motivated me because I had a family that I had to take care of. So that was one of the reasons that made me very strong. Of course, there was also always a fear of getting injured because once you get injured, you're not able to attend the tournament. And that means that your ranking will go down and automatically you will lose your salary.
In sumo wrestling, there is a lot of injury that happens, and that pressure of remaining, strong physically to be at a certain rank takes a lot of physical and mental strength. Now, I'm sure he must have gotten injured a couple of times. Can you talk about one of the injuries that he remembers, and he came out of it?
The biggest injury, of course, I suffered from many injuries such as the knee or the back. But the biggest injury I would say that happened to me was I had a knee injury. I had to go through a surgery and took time to recover. But it was a big decision to get the surgery. I had to decide because once I got the surgery, I would have to be out from the tournament for a while until I recovered. So it was a big decision for me to decide whether I should go ahead with the surgery or not. But with a lot of support from my supporters, my family, I was able to decide to do the surgery, and eventually I recovered and I came back stronger.
What about his rivals? How is the structure like? I mean, in sports, if a fantastic sportsman has an injury, I mean, people have empathy for them, but the rivals feel very happy a lot of the times. So do you think that was the case with you?
I would say to each their own. So each wrestler thinks about himself, and actually he does not really care about, who's injured, who's not.
Yeah, sumo wrestling has been known for being very disciplined and behaving in a very humble manner, especially when someone wins the battle, and nobody goes around, yelling and all of that. So I'm not surprised that people don't think so much about their rivals. But sumo wrestling does have a strict hierarchy within the stable, and being a komusubi is not very easy. Can you take us through the journey of reaching at the top, And how does it feel to be at the top? How did he make it there? His whole journey, your whole journey.
It didn't take too much for me to become a komusubi. After I entered the world of professional wrestling, it only took about 2.5 years or 3 years, which could be considered a very short period for a wrestler to become a komusubi. So, as a wrestler to become a komusubi, life as an athlete, that didn't change much because the people, the opponents that I had been fighting with, they didn't change. At my stable, I was the highest ranked wrestler within the stable. So that meant that I had to take care of the younger wrestlers to support so that they could become strong.
What about the weight fluctuations? I mean, sumos have a very high calorie diet, and there are a lot of fluctuations. And how do you deal with the weight fluctuations or dealt with the weight fluctuations?
So, to increase weight is of course very important, but if you get too heavy, it will restrain your movement and make it very slow. And so the most important thing is to find the best, or let's say the ideal weight for yourself, which meant I could not be too heavy or I could not be too light. So that became my main area to focus upon.
And what did you eat? What was your calorie intake like? What are the foods that you would eat?
For myself, I didn't really care about the calories that I took every day. I tried to take a very well balanced meal, but for many of the wrestlers, they really kind of count the calories, and the average calories that they would have to take would be about 10,000 calories per day.
When you were injured, what did you ever contemplate retirement? Because there was so much physical, discomfort and that mental agony.
So, when I suffered from that serious knee injury, I was quite young at that time, so I kept reminding myself that I should never give up, especially with this kind of injury. I should overcome this, and as I said, I had my family with me, so I had the thoughts for my family, and I had the feeling that I cannot give up for their sake because I had to support them.
Speaking of family and his wife, people often wonder, how is the social life of sumo wrestlers? And what is the dating life like of sumo wrestlers?
Well, the sumo wrestlers, we have tournaments 6 times a year, and we also have the tournament 3 times in Tokyo. But the other 3 are in different cities in Japan. So we are only home for like half a year, and because of that, I also tried to spend a lot of time with my family, especially during the times that I was in Tokyo. The wrestlers, we practice in the morning, but after the morning practice, the rest of the afternoon is kind of free for us. So for me, I would do the morning training, and then I would try to spend more time with my family as much as it was possible.
How is the social life? For example, would you go out drinking with your friends, with your colleagues, or a partying? How is it like?
So when I was a professional, I used to go out drinking with my colleagues, but I was also in the komusubi rank. So there I had some supporters, supporting staff. So I would often go out with them to have dinner or to go out drinking with them.
And when sumo wrestlers, especially someone of your rank, goes out in Japan, what is the public perception like?
As a sumo wrestler, you always have to wear the top knot. And whenever you go out, you wear the kimono, of course. So if you go out, everybody would know you. They would recognize you that you are a wrestler And that was, it could get a little bit embarrassing sometimes.
So, literally like a celebrity status. Is that right?
Yes,
そうですね。
we
Yeah.
were like celebrities. We didn't want to be like that, but with the top knot and being recognized as a celebrity, our behavior was always under scrutiny by the public.
Talking of the top knot of the hair and the kimono and the mawashi belt, actually, can you tell a little bit about the hairstyle and how one has to do it if one is a sumo wrestler? And when can you wear the kimono? And when do you wear the mawashi belt? What is the significance of these clothing?
So, originally, the sumo wrestlers used to be the samurai. So, the top knot is the remaining of the samurai look. And to have that, you have to grow your hair for about a year or 2 years to have it made to be able to make it into the shape of the top knot. And kimono is something that a sumo wrestler must always wear. So it's like a uniform. The Sumo Association makes us wear the kimono whenever we go out. Earlier, they used to wear just one piece of underwear instead of the belt. But of course, just the underwear felt a little embarrassing. So that was the reason why we decided to use that belt, or we call it the loincloth.
And at times, does it also help them hold their opponent? Because the mawashi belt.
The mawashi belt is very important for us because, firstly, it makes it easier to fight, and secondly, no one can hide any weapons, which makes it a fair fight.
And what are the absolute do's and don'ts in the ring and even outside of the ring in general?
So, there are actually 8 rules that are called kinjai. For example, you cannot use your fist when you fight, and so you always have to be open-handed. Or you cannot kick above the belt, so you cannot kick the upper body. You can kick the legs or the knees as well. When we become a professional wrestler, we go to a small training school for about half a year. There, we study the rules for about 6 months. We also study the history of sumo, or how to behave as a wrestler.
And no girls in that school?
Of course not.
No.
No.
And sumo wrestling is generally for men. There are no female sumo wrestlers.
Sumo wrestling is generally for men. There are no female wrestlers. Especially for professionals, it is only the world of men. But we have the amateur sumo wrestlers.
These sumo tournaments are very competitive, and it takes a lot of strength and a lot of training. Can you take us through your training in detail and how you trained and how you coped up with the mental stress and the physical training?
There is one. For example, like practical training method, which is called the Shiko. Shiko means stomping our legs, and to do that movement, we have to keep our body well balanced. To be able to do the Shiko, we raise our feet one by one, and at the same time, we have to endure our own weight on one foot or on the other. In sumo, the feet movement, which we call Suriyashi, is extremely important. It is squatting down, sliding the feet, while elbows and palms face up with arms close inside to imagine pushing the opponent. There's also another training method called Butsukari Geko. It's a training where wrestlers push each other with full strength, and they have to keep pushing the opponent till they are out of the ring. They do this kind of movement for about 20 to 30 minutes per person.
Yeah, and how was your teacher? The teachers are very strict as well.
So at the stable, we call the teacher Oyakata, who is the stable master. He's the person who is in charge of the training. And of course, the stable master, Oyakata, is always strict during the training. But luckily, my Oyakata was very thoughtful, as he would look after all the wrestlers and find the best way for them to do the training.
That's very true because a lot of the times we often end up liking the subjects where the teacher is very nice. If the teacher isn't nice, we immediately start hating that subject.
For sumo wrestlers, it is a very important decision when choosing the stable, because once you enter a stable, you are not allowed to go to another stable. So once you decide, you will always have to stick with the same stable.
How did you decide?
Well, my Oyakata used to be a senior in college. And when I was in the second year of university, I suddenly lost my father. At that time, my Oyakata, he came to my father's funeral service. And that gesture really touched my heart. It was then that I made the decision that whenever I would only enter his stable.
When you were a Komusubi, did you train your juniors?
When I was Komusubi, I was not Oyakata. So, rather than training, we would like to give each other advice. For example, if a junior would ask me how to get stronger, I would give him advice. And it was the other way around too. Even my seniors would support me.
When dealing with your juniors, were you like your Oyakata or a very strict one?
Even if it is a strict way of training or advice on how to train them, there's always affection towards them.
Sumos are actually not allowed to drive in Japan. Is that true?
本当です、本当です。
Why is that?
As a sumo wrestler,
やっぱこの
we have to wear kimono,
その
and
外に外出する場合は
wearing a kimono
あの
makes it quite difficult to
です
drive.
からもちろん
And that is the reason why we are not allowed to drive.
Right. What about bicycle?
Bicycles are okay.
Okay, okay. And why there are so many other martial arts forms and like shiatsu and judo? I understand that your brother was a sumo wrestler and that might have had an influence in your decision. But there are so many other...
My whole family loves sumo. It was not just because of my brother. The rules of sumo are very simple. Once you have pushed your opponent out of the ring, they lose. Or they touch the ground, they lose. The match only lasts for about maybe 30 to 40 seconds, which makes it a very fast game. At the grand tournament, we have the time limit of 4 minutes. But the actual fighting is for only 30 to 40 seconds. And it is only one match per day for one wrestler.
And what has been one of the most or the most rewarding moments in your life as a wrestler?
As a sumo wrestler, to have a fight with the Yokozuna Grand Champion, where we could be the very last sight of the day, and also it would be a very honorable thing. And I had the opportunity to be in the match several times. And I also had the opportunity to fight with the Yokozuna, the Grand Champion. And there were 2 times that I actually won the Grand Champion as well.
What about the economic side of sumo wrestlers? I mean, what about the salaries? And everywhere I've heard and read that it's very regimented. It's a very disciplined sport. You have to be extremely hardworking. But compared to other sports in the world, it doesn't pay you as handsomely.
So, compared to other professional sports where you sign an annual contract with the team, which would guarantee you a certain amount of money, irrespective of your performance. However, in sumo wrestling, it depends upon your ranking and how good you score at the tournament. For example, if you get injured and you're absent, then your ranking will go down, which means you will not get a salary.
When you had your injury and you were away from wrestling for about a year, as you said, and as you're saying that they don't pay you salary at that time, how did you manage? I mean, mentally, it must be very traumatic. Forget about the physical pain, but
Well, when I had my surgery, of course, before that I had some savings with me. So I used that money for the time being. And also, I had some very supportive sponsors who took care of me, and I'm very grateful to them. During that time, mentally, it was very tough for me to watch the tournament on TV because I was absent. But at the same time, it motivated me to push myself. It gave me a new perspective and some time to introspect. I continued with my trainings and rehab, and I also watched young wrestlers wrestle. And that really motivated me further to go back into the stable. I just thought about the tournament all the time, and I think that really helped me to get back.
you come from a family of athletes, sportsmen. Your parents, your brother is a sumo wrestler. What is it like to be the wife of a sumo wrestler who perhaps, because I don't know if she comes from a family of wrestlers as well. If somebody doesn't, how difficult and challenging and rewarding it can be to have a sumo wrestler as their spouse.
Now, my wife does not come from a sumo background. As a spouse of a sumo wrestler, it means that your husband will be away from home for almost a year. And then there is also a high risk of being injured. Sumos also wear the top knots whenever they go out. So that is a very different kind of world. And she has to be aware of that before getting married. In case of my wife, she took her time to get used to all this, and I'm very grateful to her.
When did you realize that you would want to retire from wrestling, and why did you choose to retire?
I had this strong urge to do something more, but physically it became more and more challenging to continue. So, it was a big decision for me to make, the decision to retire. Also, my knees condition was not very good, and I couldn't continue to win. And the biggest reason was that I felt that although I was motivated to fight, but my physical condition was not allowing me. So I felt that continuing like this would be too risky. So I chose to retire.
What lessons has he learned? Biggest lessons have you learned as a sumo wrestler in your life?
It was, of course, the discipline and also the gratitude towards people.
What are the career paths that a sumo wrestler can choose after retirement?
Well, it is very hard to become the Oyakata, the stable master. There are only few seats. So most of the wrestlers, they start working at the restaurant. Or maybe some start working in the construction industry. Or some become a caretaker at a nursery home.
And as wrestling becomes such a big part of the identity and your life, how do you keep it separate from your personal life and work? These days we talk about work-life balance. We talk about, our work life should be completely separate. Personal life is separate. Social life is separate. But being a sumo wrestler in itself is such a prestigious role. How did you manage?
Because I was able to have a family, and also as a high rank wrestler, I was able to have my old home. I didn't need to live in the stable. So once I came home, I just turned out to be like a normal father or a husband. So that was the way I was able to kind of divide my life as a wrestler and also as a family person. Once I go to the stable and put my Mawashi belt, I would become a wrestler. But once I would leave the stable and go home, I would just become an ordinary husband, just a normal dad.
But tomorrow, if your son comes and tells you, Dad, I want to be a sumo wrestler, what would you say?
Well, I have two sons and they go to the elementary school. And they started sumo when they entered elementary school. And of course, when they started as a young child, I supported them. But if they tell me that they would like to continue as a professional sumo wrestler, I might be a little hesitant because I know how strict the lifestyle is. And I would warn them how difficult and hard it is to become a sumo wrestler. But of course, if that is what they truly want, then I will support them.
Actually, that brings me to a very interesting question about nepotism. Does nepotism occur in sumo wrestling, where the father helps the child and gets more favors in the ring and in the stable because he's so and so's son, and he would be favored and get more opportunity?
Unfortunately, there is no advantage of being the son of a sumo wrestler. If you become a wrestler, even if your father is the stable master and you enter his stable, there is no real advantage given.
How do you think sumo wrestling has evolved over the years from when you started and now you retired and now your children are into sumo as well?
When I used to fight as a komusubi, there were like 4 grand champion yokozuna and 5 second ranking ozeki. So I was in the 3rd position. But there were like 9 other strong wrestlers above me. So it was very difficult for me to get into the better ranking or to be able to win the tournament. However, now we only have 2 grand champions.
What is your advice to the younger generation who wants to learn this form of wrestling, or anyone who wants to become a sumo wrestler?
Compared to, say, baseball or soccer, sumo is a much more severe lifestyle. But at the same time, it is a very, very simple game, as the rules are very simple. And during the training, you can manage to build a very well-balanced body. And of course, you only need one equipment, which is the Mawashi belt, which will be a lot cheaper than having much more other equipments for major sports. So I recommend that if you are interested in sumo, maybe you should at least once come and give it a try.
Yeah. And that brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you, Mr. Sakuma, for your time and for giving us a glimpse in your life. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Arigato gozaimasu.
Thank you. Arigato gozaimasu.